As you can see on the wall, there's an old, an almost broken mantle that needs to be replaced. So we were commissioned to make a new one. And here is how it starts. I started with using rerouting the cable, using new drywall, and this project is going to be using hard maple with a floating shelf mantle. So I suggest you just watch along and see the steps of making this build come to life. I'm cutting the actual mantle to the size now. This hardwood maple turned out to be harder than I thought it would be. Initial plan was to use soft maple actually, but in the middle of the project, getting hold of soft maple was kind of a hassle and was taking a bit of a time, so I thought I would go with the hard maple. And it is very hard to work with, fasten with the screws, or even here you can see me sanding it. It's very hard. Sander is really struggling to get it the proper smoothness of the wood, I would say. So after all the sanding and everything, I took it to the client site, and here I'm using all the miters. This mantle is going to be joined with miter corners. As you can see, I use the tapes to get the corners right, like painter tapes, and tried to nail them with my nailer, which is a Milwaukee nailer, and it's pretty strong nailer, but I wasn't confident with it, so I changed my mind, going with using screws, even though the fear was, well, all the screws are going to be exposed and everyone going to see the head of the screws. Well, I had a plan in mind where I was thinking to plug them later on using obviously the same material, which it turned out to be nicer than I actually anticipated it to be, and stronger. So that's what I'm using screws here. I'll try to make the joint as tight as possible. And I thought, you know, later on I'm gonna do some matching color caulking. Should there be any gaps, which happened to be, and I was lucky to get a matching color caulking to get all the gaps filled up. So the next step was to use the, I'm not sure if I'm using the right term here, the shiplap, like a vertical shiplap, but actually it wasn't. It was just a tongue and groove with the V exposure, which you're seeing me doing the tongue and groove on my router, and I went ahead with the V exposure as well, which was kind of nice. Again, the router bit, I'm sure it was a very sharp router bit, but this being hard maple, it wasn't easy to get that part done. So I had to go slow, very slow actually. During this routing, I found that the router bit is actually ripping and pulling the firewire away instead of cutting, so I had to go slow. Anyhow, that was done, sanded, which I am going to spare you off of that sanding procedure. I decided to make the back like this. This is not a drywall. The back plywood stronger by attaching more screws to the studs. Since I had the stud exposed when I was ripping things apart, we marked them. You can see me here trying to get the fibers kind of bent over the corners, which worked pretty nice actually. Where you have a bit of a gap on your miter, this is a good technique to bend the router over. I mean, bend the fiber over. This is what I meant by shiplap and vertical with a V groove exposure actually. So here is obviously a time lapse of what I was doing. Then it was time to get back to the shop working on the floating shelf by cleaning off the rough edges. When that was done, which was not that difficult actually, it was pretty solid, pretty nice slab of wood. And here you can see I'm marking my bracket, my floating bracket. You can see this is a 6-inch bracket. Like those tubes are 6 inches long, but since there were like curves on the slabs, I had to cut them to this shorter size because I feared that it might just, the hole would be big enough, like too long, and it would just protrude out. And later on, I did cut them to the size, shorter size, like 5 inches, 4 inches, and some parts like 3 inches, depending on the width of that slab. Now I'm recessing the bracket with the router here, so that it would get flush to the wall when it is mounted. All right, so here's a couple of shots of the floating shells, which I was very proud of. And I'm signing off for now, and hope to see you with the next one. Thank you all for watching. Take care.